Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the most influential figures and complex topics of the moment, tear open the source material, and give you the fast track to being the smartest person in the room.
Today, we are opening up a stack of sources detailing the life and really the staggering ascent of an individual whose company has officially become not just a powerful player in tech, but the foundational engine room for the global artificial intelligence boom.
Yeah, this story is basically a roadmap to the future, and it's written by a very, very unlikely cartographer.
It really is.
We are talking about Jensen Huang. And to set the stage for, the sheer unprecedented magnitude of his current status, we have to look at one number.
One number that almost doesn't sound real.
A figure that just demands attention, especially when you're talking market capitalization.
Oh, trillion.
With T. That's the reality. Nvidia, the company Huang co-founded, became the first company in history to reach a $5 trillion market cap. That was October 2025.
And this isn't just a financial milestone, right? This is a technological marker. Absolutely. It places him, without any exaggeration, at the absolute epicenter of the most powerful economic and technological transformation of our age. Possibly since the internet itself.
And crucially, he didn't just step into this role, he built it. He's the founder, the president, and the chief executive officer of Nvidia.
A title he's held without interruption since 1993.
Since 93. And this exponential growth, especially over the last few years, has obviously translated into personal wealth that is almost difficult to wrap your head around.
Yeah, our sources note that as of December 2025, Forbes is estimating his net worth at US $152 billion.
Which puts him where globally?
That positions him as the 8th wealthiest individual on the planet.
So our mission today is to move past those staggering numbers and really get into the how and the why.
Right. We are going to unpack the extraordinary journey of this Taiwanese and American executive, tracing his path from a really unique and challenging childhood.
Seriously challenging.
Marked by intense movement and unexpected adversity, through decades of relentless technical struggle, all the way to leading the charge in GPU production and, critically fueling this AI revolution we're all living through.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because while Nvidia has been around for decades, this level of celebrity, this kind of recognition for Huang, it feels really recent.
It is.
So we have to ask, why is everyone talking about him now with such, feverish intensity?
Well, the timing is completely driven by the maturity of the AI boom. While Nvidia was, fantastically successful in the gaming and professional graphics world for decades, that was still a niche.
A very lucrative niche, but still a niche.
Exactly. The current global inflection point, the ability to train and run these massive language models, it relies entirely on their graphics processing units, their GPUs.
And he didn't just stumble into this.
Oh, no. He positioned the company for it through years of strategic and often really painful decisions.
And that positioning has resulted in this enormous mainstream recognition. You have Time magazine, for instance, naming him one of the architects of AI.
For their Person of the Year issue in 2025, yeah.
Right.
Alongside the other pioneers of deep learning.
He also kept appearing on the Time 100 list, right?
Yeah.
In 2021 and again in 2024.
Right. This isn't just a business leader getting a financial pat on the back. This is someone whose influence is now shaping national infrastructure, geopolitics, and, culture itself.
And that is what makes his story so essential for you, the learner, who wants to understand the foundational players. So our core question, the theme that binds this whole deep dive together is this.
How did a microchip designer lead a company, initially focused just on PC games graphics, to become the indisputable, necessary engine of the entire global AI infrastructure?
It truly is an unlikely path. It's forged in adaptability and just extreme persistence.
And when you dive into that path, the word unlikely doesn't even begin to cover the sheer drama of his early years.
Let's start right there at the beginning. We need to understand the formative environment that, instilled that adaptability in the first place.
We should. So Jensen Huang was born Huang Zhensun in Taipei, Taiwan on February 17th, 1963. He came from a middle-class Taiwanese family. His father was a chemical engineer at an oil refinery.
And his mother was a teacher.
A school teacher, yes. They were native speakers of Taiwanese Hokkien, a dialect spoken pretty widely in that region.
And this was a family defined by movement right from the get-go. As a child, he first moved with his family to Tainan, but then around age 5, they moved again.
This time to Thailand for his father's career at the refinery. They were there for about 4 years, and during this time he went to the Ruamrudi International School in Bangkok.
And here's an early detail that I think just speaks volumes about his mother's ambition and foresight.
It really does. Knowing that English was essential for global success, even while they were living in Thailand, Jensen's mother had this highly disciplined approach.
10 words a day.
Every single day, she randomly selected 10 words from the dictionary to teach him and his older brother English.
That's incredible discipline, a rigorous, dedicated process that gave them the language skills that would be, well, invaluable just a few years later.
That focus on foundational prep is key. But the next phase of his life, this is where it gets really dramatic. His father travels to New York to train with an air conditioning company, sees the opportunity in the U.S., and decides to send his sons there.
This happens in 1973.
And the motivation here was serious, tied to real geopolitical uncertainty. Huang, who was only 9 years old and still not fluent in English, was sent by his parents.
And they sold almost everything they owned just for the tuition.
They did. They sent him to live with an uncle in Tacoma, Washington, mainly to escape the widespread social unrest and political turbulence that was really escalating in Thailand at the time.
And here we hit the big aha moment.
Yeah.
The pivotal incident that honestly sounds more like the plot of a movie than the early life of a $5 trillion CEO.
It really does. The uncle, who was a recent immigrant himself and, probably didn't know the American educational landscape, mistakenly enrolled 9-year-old Jensen and his older brother in the Oneida Baptist Institute in Kentucky.
So the idea was what, a prestigious East Coast boarding school?
That was the intention, yeah. Something like that, maybe an Ivy League track kind of place. But in reality, Oneida was a religious reform academy for troubled youth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was an institution where discipline was harsh. Students were expected to work daily for their room and board. For his older brother, this meant manual labor on a tobacco farm nearby.
And for young Jensen.
For young Jensen, life in the boys' dormitory was just brutal. It was characterized by profound isolation and bullying. He arrived as, and these are his words, an undersized Asian immigrant with long hair and heavily accented English.
The sources say he was frequently bullied and beaten, and his daily work assignment, to pay his way,
Was one of the most thankless jobs imaginable, cleaning the toilets.
It's an incredibly difficult environment to even imagine, but it was also a crucible for this kind of extreme adaptation.
It really was. And there's that fantastic anecdote about how he survived through this sort of asymmetrical trade.
This is the story with his roommate, right?
Yeah. He taught his roommate, who was this massive, tattooed 17-year-old, reportedly had knife scars, and was illiterate. He taught him how to read.
And in exchange,
In exchange, he was taught how to bench press, a necessary skill for survival in that dorm.
that story, that trade-off knowledge for protection, finding value even in an adversarial environment, that tells you everything you need to know about the pragmatism that would later define his entire business career.
He says he remembers his life in Kentucky more vividly than just about any other time, which tells you just how deep the psychological impact of that period was.
Thankfully, it was relatively short. 2 years later, the rest of the family finally settled in Beaverton, Oregon, and the brothers were able to leave the academy.
And once he was in a stable environment, his academic performance was just stellar. He attended Aloha High School, where he skipped 2 grades.
And graduated at 16.
16 years old. The resilience he developed in Kentucky clearly translated into just intense intellectual focus.
This focus wasn't just in the classroom. He was a genuinely competitive athlete.
A nationally ranked table tennis player. He placed 3rd in junior doubles at the U.S. Table Tennis Open when he was just 15.
Wow. And he was also deep into the math, computer, and science clubs.
And it was through those clubs that he had his first serious interaction with the tech that would one day make him famous. In 1977, his school bought an Apple II computer.
And he was programming in BASIC and playing games like Super Star Trek.
Right. But before the degrees in the corner office came the grit of service work, starting at age 15 and continuing until he started college in 1983.
He worked the graveyard shift at a local Denny's.
As a dishwasher, a busboy, and a waiter, full-time nights while finishing high school.
That combination of demanding physical labor, academic excellence, and competitive sport is such an unusual profile. It really sets the stage for that relentless work ethic.
It does. He enrolled in Oregon State University, explicitly choosing it for its low in-state tuition costs. He focused on electrical engineering and computer science, graduating early with high honors in 1984.
And he always felt like an outsider, even there. He recalls being the youngest kid in school, the only student who looked like a child.
And then, while working full-time in Silicon Valley, he pursued graduate classes at night at Stanford University, earning his master's in electrical engineering in 1992.
The narrative of this whole period is just persistence, extreme frugality, and relentless self-improvement, learning while doing.
A theme that runs straight into the founding of Nvidia.
Absolutely. Which brings us perfectly to how he laid the professional foundation that made that jump to entrepreneurship even possible.
So after graduating from Oregon State, Huang immediately got a job as a microchip designer in Silicon Valley. He had interviewed at several big companies, but he chose Advanced Micro Devices, AMD.
Why AMD?
He said he just felt familiar with their technology. He spent several years there designing their microprocessors, all while juggling that demanding schedule of Stanford at night and raising two young kids.
But he eventually left AMD for LSI Logic.
Right. He was drawn by their newer, more advanced chip design processes, which promised better efficiency and scale.
And this move to LSI Logic was so critical because it was there, in the late 1980s, that he met the two brilliant engineers who would become his Nvidia co-founders.
Chris Malachowski and Curtis Prime. This is where the constellation of talent necessary for Nvidia's birth finally assembled.
And the three of them were immediately thrown together on this high-stakes project that, in hindsight, was the direct precursor to Nvidia itself.
Right. LSI Logic had a major contract with Sun Microsystems, and the trio was tasked with designing a new graphics accelerator card for Sun's workstation lineup.
And the sources revealed just how intense this collaboration was. It really foreshadowed the kind of high-stakes, pressure cooker environment that would define Nvidia's founding.
Oh, absolutely. While they were working on the card's complex manufacturing process, Malachowski and Priam disagreed, intensely, on the chip's design.
There was a legendary level of engineering friction there.
The source noted they broke every tool that LSI Logic had because they were constantly pushing the limits of what the processes could handle.
That kind of internal competition, pushing boundaries until a system breaks, it's key to innovation, but it also shows the sheer technical ambition they all shared.
And despite that friction, the result was a huge success. In 1989, they finalized the accelerator, which they called the GX graphics engine. And it wasn't just technically sound, it was a massive financial success.
The GX engine contributed directly to Sun Microsystems' huge revenue growth in that period, right? It went from something like $262 million to over $650 million.
It did. And because of the GX engine's success, Huang was promoted to be the director of LSI's Coreware division, which manufactured chips for hardware vendors. He was clearly on the fast track up the corporate ladder.
But corporate life, even in a leadership role, wasn't enough to satisfy their combined ambition.
Not at all. When business started to slow for Sun after 1990, and maybe seeing a ceiling at LSI, the three men resigned their jobs to pursue a venture together.
And their new goal was super specific and consumer-focused.
Right. Making specialized graphics chips for the rapidly growing PC games market.
And this is where we get the famous, almost mythical founding story. It all starts not in some sterile boardroom, but at a Denny's.
A Denny's roadside diner in East San Jose. They met there frequently in 92 and 93 to hash out the business plan, the technical roadmap, everything.
And he chose Denny's because of his old job.
Partially. That, and as he explained, it was quieter than home and had cheap coffee. The symbolism is just so powerful. The $5 trillion company, the engine of the AI age, literally started in a breakfast booth, connected directly to his humble beginnings as a teenage busboy.
And the initial capital was just as humble.
Unbelievably so. To formally incorporate the company, Huang met with a lawyer on April 5, 1993, who demanded a cash retainer. Huang used the $200 cash he had in his pocket.
And then he went back to the other two.
Yeah, he went back to Priam and Malachowski and asked each of them to chip in $200 for their shares.
So the total initial capital for the company that would one day hit a $5 trillion valuation was
$600. Exactly $600. And on April 5, 1993, Huang personally signed the original Articles of Incorporation. The contrast is just almost unbelievable.
And the name. It wasn't always Nvidia.
No, they initially considered Envision. Huang suggested changing it to Nvidia, which is based on the Latin word Nvidia, meaning envy.
Because Priam wanted their competitors to turn green with envy.
Exactly. It embodied their aggressive, competitive spirit right from day one.
And despite being the youngest of the three founders, at 30, they immediately deferred to him as CEO.
They did. Priam specifically recalled they told Huang, "You're in charge of running the company, all the stuff Chris and I don't know how to do." The leadership dynamic was set from the very beginning.
It's a powerful testament to their faith in his vision,
Yeah.
even as they were walking into what he would later describe as just an absolute gauntlet of execution and near constant failure. And here's where it gets really interesting, because that journey from the $600 initial capital to the $5 trillion powerhouse was not a smooth ascent. It was, in his own words, a series of near-death experiences.
He's been remarkably candid about the sheer difficulty of those early years. He readily admitted that the three of them, back in 1993, had no idea how to start a company.
He later said that building Nvidia turned out to have been 1,000,000 times harder than they expected.
And the gravity of that struggle is captured in this thought. He even suggested that if he had realized up front the extent of the pain and suffering, the challenges, the embarrassment, and the shame, he probably wouldn't have done it at all.
That is a staggering admission from a CEO of a company this successful. And the struggle began immediately, didn't it? With a huge foundational technical misstep.
A huge one. For their first graphics accelerator chips, Nvidia focused on rendering scenes using something called quadrilateral primitives.
Basically, four-sided geometric shapes. This was their architectural bet for how 3D worlds would be built.
Exactly. But their competitors, companies like S3 and 3dsFX, they correctly focused on what would become the dominant standard, which was triangle primitives.
That shift sounds subtle, but architecturally it was critical.
It was everything. Triangles are fundamentally easier to handle in dedicated graphics hardware. They allow for much more efficient tessellation, that's breaking down complex surfaces into manageable parts, and they're just easier for the hardware pipeline to process at speed.
So by focusing on quadrilaterals, Nvidia had put itself on a path to failure almost immediately.
They created a product that was technically inferior and inefficient compared to the market standard. This near-fatal mistake meant the company barely survived long enough to pivot.
Their survival hinged entirely on external faith.
That's right. The company literally ran out of money. Their lifeline was a crucial deal with Sega, which agreed to keep Nvidia afloat with a $5 million investment.
And that infusion gave them just enough runway, just enough time to ditch their entire quadrilateral architecture and scramble to build a new triangle-based chipset.
And even after that $5 million lifeline, the financial situation was just desperate. By the time they successfully released the Rivia 128, the product that finally saved them, in August of '97.
They were down to exactly 1 month of payroll left.
1 month. That razor's edge existence, that constant fear of imminent collapse, it became culturally foundational for them.
It led directly to the company's unofficial motto, which Huang used to begin presentations for years.
Our company is 30 days from going out of business.
It's an incredible story of persistence forced by necessity. And your point here is crucial. Huang sees that pain and suffering of those early years, that constant brinkmanship, as absolutely essential.
He does. It was the crucible that forced rapid evolution and relentless optimization. It made him, he believes, a far better, more focused, and maybe more paranoid leader.
And that focused leadership has been maintained with remarkable consistency. I mean, he's been Nvidia's chief executive for over 3 decades now.
A tenure that the Wall Street Journal called almost unheard of in fast-moving Silicon Valley, where founder turnover is basically the norm.
After surviving the Rivia 128, Nvidia finally stabilized, went public in 1999, and continued to dominate the discrete graphics card market. But for most of the next 2 decades, they were still largely known only by 2 groups.
Hardcore PC gamers and computer graphics experts. We noted that in 2017, a Fortune article famously acknowledged this niche status, saying, if you haven't heard of Nvidia, you can be forgiven.
That obscurity ended abruptly in the late 2010s, primarily because of the explosion of deep learning and large-scale AI.
Right. This is where the decade-old architecture designed for rendering dragons in video games suddenly became the necessary engine for, predicting the stock market or translating languages.
Okay, we need to unpack that technical pivot because this is the single most important strategic insight of Nvidia's entire history. Why did a graphics processing unit, a GPU designed for handling visual geometry, become the perfect machine for AI?
It all comes down to 2 words: parallel processing. Think about a traditional CPU, a central processing unit. It's optimized for sequential tasks, running an OS, handling database queries, doing things one after the other very, very quickly. It has a few powerful brains or cores.
Right, so it's like a dedicated genius solving one complex problem at a time extremely fast.
Exactly. A GPU, however, was designed for a totally different task: rendering a screen. To render a complex 3D scene, say a detailed game environment, you have to calculate the position, color, and texture of millions of individual pixels all at the same time.
So it requires doing many simple calculations simultaneously.
At the exact same time. To achieve this, a GPU is built with thousands of smaller, less powerful cores, all working in parallel.
So instead of one genius, you have thousands of competent workers all executing simple instructions concurrently.
Precisely. Now think about deep learning. Training a massive neural network involves one fundamental operation that's repeated quadrillions of times: matrix multiplication.
And that's the mathematical process of feeding data through the network to adjust the weights or connections between the artificial neurons.
Right. And matrix multiplication is fundamentally a parallel task, isn't it?
It is the definition of a parallel task.
You can break down a huge matrix calculation into thousands of smaller independent calculations. The GPU architecture, designed for thousands of simultaneous pixel calculations, turned out to be perfectly suited for running thousands of simultaneous matrix calculations.
They could execute AI workloads how much faster?
10, 50, even 100 times faster than a standard CPU.
So Huang didn't so much pivot to AI as he found the perfect, unexpected application for the hardware he'd been refining for 2 decades. But the hardware isn't enough, is it? We have to talk about the software lock-in that really solidified their dominance. CUE.
This is maybe the most strategic and often overlooked piece of Nvidia's dominance. CUDA stands for Compute Unified Device Architecture. It's Nvidia's proprietary parallel computing platform and programming model.
And they introduced this way back in 2006.
2006, long before the mainstream AI boom.
That foresight is just incredible.
It proved invaluable. By offering CUDA, NVIDIA gave developers the tools, the libraries, the frameworks to easily program their GPUs for general-purpose computing, not just graphics.
So when the AI boom really hit around 2015,
the entire burgeoning field of machine learning academic researchers, startups, big tech companies was already writing its core algorithms and frameworks, things like TensorFlow and PyTorch, using CUDA.
So even if AMD or Intel eventually produced a highly competitive AI chip, the whole ecosystem was already trained and optimized to run on NVIDIA software.
Exactly. It created a massive switching cost for anyone looking to build AI infrastructure. It's the ultimate network effect. The hardware is great, but the software moat CUDA, that's what locked in the developers and therefore locked in the market.
And this combination is why the acceleration figures are so staggering.
The numbers reflecting this AI boom are just dizzying. Huang's personal net worth exploded from a very comfortable US $3 billion in 2019 to an astronomical US $90 billion by May 2024.
A direct parallel to the rocketing demand for the AI infrastructure powered by their chips.
Right. The current generation of chips, like the Hopper H100 and the new Blackwell B200, are basically sold out before they're even manufactured. These are multi-$1,000 chips that are absolutely essential for training the next generation of large language models. The demand is relentless because, well, the AI race can't happen without Nvidia.
And the milestones just keep tumbling. They hit a $3 trillion market cap in June 2024, and then, as we said at the top, became the first company to reach $5 trillion in October 2025. This isn't slow, steady growth.
No, this is exponential growth fueled by technological necessity. It's a bottleneck that, for now, only they control.
It's the definition of being in the right place at the right time with the right foundational tech and having the foresight with CUDA to just capitalize on it completely.
That corporate trajectory is one thing, but let's step away from the financial reports for a minute and look at the man himself. Given that he was trained in this brutal efficiency and constant paranoia from the Oneida experience and the Rivia 128 near collapse, how does he manage a $5 trillion company?
Yeah, is his style as ruthless as his youth suggests? Or has he mellowed?
He certainly has not mellowed in terms of conventional corporate structure. His management style remains strikingly unconventional, especially for a company of this size and influence.
Give us some specifics. What does that look like day to day?
Well, first, he doesn't have a fixed office. He just roams the NVIDIA headquarters, which is this huge, sprawling campus, and settles temporarily in conference rooms or empty desks as he needs them.
That embodies a kind of restless energy, a hands-on, non-hierarchical approach.
It does, and it feeds right into the second major unconventional point, his flat structure. For a company with tens of thousands of employees and a $5 trillion valuation, he keeps a remarkably flat management pyramid.
How many direct reports?
As of November 2024, he reportedly had around 60 direct reports.
60. That violates every single textbook principle of effective management for a global organization.
It does.
So is this truly strategic brilliance? Or is it just the ego of a founder who refuses to delegate and create necessary layers of insulation?
That's the core question, right? And his philosophy leans heavily toward the former, though you could argue it's a mix of both. His belief is that maintaining a flat structure forces extreme accountability and efficiency.
He believes the people reporting to him should be at the top of their game and require the least amount of pampering.
Implying they should be highly self-sufficient, high-performing executives who don't need a lot of hands-on guidance or buffering layers.
So in a sense, he's recreating that 30 days from going out of business
Sure.
intensity at the executive level. He's demanding that everyone operate with the urgency and self-reliance of a startup.
Precisely. It creates a culture of intense communication and prioritization. And here's a small telling detail that just encapsulates his worldview perfectly. He famously doesn't wear a watch.
And when asked why,
He explains, now is the most important time. It's this constant, embedded focus on the present moment, on immediate action, something he learned during those early, constant survival stretches.
and that intense internal focus and decades of operating in a technical niche has very recently just collided head-on with massive public recognition.
Yeah, shifting him from a niche tech leader to a bona fide cultural phenomenon, especially in his native region of Asia.
You're talking about Jensanity.
Jensanity. The media coined the term to describe his sudden and immense celebrity status in Taiwan, often comparing it directly to the Linsanity phenomenon around the basketball player Jeremy Lin back in 2012.
The scale of the attention is almost unbelievable for a CEO. I mean, in March 2024, Mark Zuckerberg posted a photo with him on Instagram.
And summed it up perfectly. He said he's like Taylor Swift, but for tech.
An analogy that just grounds his technical impact and pop culture relevance.
And during his visits to Taiwan for big events like Computex in 2024 and 2025, the crowds were enormous. Large groups of fans, media, paparazzi, they followed him and his family everywhere they went.
They were mobbing him for photos and autographs.
Yeah, the news media noted the recurrence of Jensanity in 2025, describing him as being constantly surrounded by adoring fans and excited reporters, while his bodyguards struggled to hold back the crowds.
It's a fascinating, almost bizarre dual identity. The secretive, hard-charging CEO of a B2B company suddenly at the center of a cultural hurricane.
And he holds dual Taiwanese and American citizenship, and his linguistic journey itself reflects this pragmatic, hands-on dedication to the business.
He grew up speaking Taiwanese Hokkien, but he learned Mandarin Chinese for a very specific reason.
He learned it phonetically while working at AMD back in 1984. He learned it specifically so he could communicate directly with the Chinese photomask workers at the company.
And for listeners who aren't deep into semiconductor manufacturing, what's the significance of a photomask worker?
They're essential. They create the actual stencils or masks that are used to etch the integrated circuits onto the silicon wafers. It's the bedrock of the chip design process.
So by learning their language, he wasn't just being polite.
No, he was showing how fundamental and hands-on his involvement was in ensuring the quality and successful fabrication of the chips. It's the definition of learning a language for a very specific, practical business purpose.
We should also touch on his personal connections and family life, which are still deeply integrated with his professional life.
He met his future wife, Lori Mills, while they were students at Oregon State University. She was his engineering lab partner.
They married in 1985 and have 2 children, Spencer and Madison.
And the next generation is now deeply involved in the family business. Madison is currently the director of product marketing at Nvidia after getting experience in the hotel industry. And their son, Spencer, is a product manager at Nvidia.
And Spencer also launched a very successful bar in Taipei, right?
He did in 2015. It was named one of the top 50 bars in Asia by Forbes before it closed in 2021.
And the family's housing history kind of mirrors Nvidia's corporate trajectory.
It really does. They started in what are described as ordinary middle-class starter homes in San Jose before the '99 IPO. As the wealth accumulated, they eventually moved to Los Altos Hills, got a second home in Hawaii, and in 2017, a company linked to the Huangs reportedly acquired a San Francisco mansion for $38 million.
It's the classic Silicon Valley rags to riches real estate story. But the most surprising connection, the one that makes the whole semiconductor world feel like this intricate family drama, might be his relation to the CEO of his former employer and main competitor.
AMD. You're referring to Lisa Su.
Yes. How are they related?
Huang and Lisa Su are first cousins, once removed. The connection is through his mother, who is the youngest sister of Su's maternal grandfather.
And the twist that makes this a real industry anecdote is that Huang didn't even know about the connection.
He was completely unaware of it until Lisa Su became the CEO of AMD, which suddenly made them heads of rival, highly competitive, multi-billion-dollar chip companies.
That's incredible. It adds a whole other layer of competitive intensity.
It does. And despite that rivalry, Huang maintains close ties with other industry giants. He's a longtime friend of Charles Liang, the co-founder of Supermicro, which uses Nvidia chips heavily in its servers.
And he's also famously a close friend and confidant of Morris Chang, the legendary founder of TSMC.
The foundry responsible for manufacturing Nvidia's most advanced chips. The relationships are key.
So we have a man who built a $5 trillion company from a $600 investment, who was shaped by cleaning toilets in a reform school, and who is now a rock star CEO surrounded by paparazzi in Taiwan. That level of success and acknowledging that struggle almost always translates into a profound commitment to giving back.
And his philanthropy is on the same staggering scale as his wealth.
It is, and it's highly strategic and connected right back to his life story. Jensen and Lori Huang established the Jensen and Lori Huang Foundation back in 2007 with an initial donation of Nvidia stock,
Valued at the time at $300 million.
which was a tremendously generous donation then. But because of the exponential appreciation of Nvidia stock, the foundation's assets have just soared.
Our sources project that by late 2025, the foundation's value exceeded $12 billion, placing it among the largest private foundations in the entire United States.
And the foundation strategically focuses its support on areas that directly align with his personal history and his industry.
Higher education, STEM initiatives, public health, and community development. They often emphasize institutions connected to their own history and the San Francisco Bay Area ecosystem.
And the financial scale of their annual distributions is massive. The foundation is projected to distribute something like $369 million in grants and donations in 2025 alone.
It's worth noting that a significant portion, about 2/3 of its grants, are allocated to donor-advised funds, like the G-Force Fund at Schwab Charitable, which allows for maximum flexibility in their giving.
But let's look at the key philanthropic highlights because they provide a direct, powerful connection back to the journey we just mapped out. The most poignant example is
The Oneida Baptist Institute in Kentucky, the reform school he accidentally attended.
in 2019, the Huangs donated $2 million to Oneida to fund the construction of Jensen Huang Hall, a dormitory and classroom facility for female students.
That is a direct, substantial acknowledgement of the formative, albeit painful, years he spent there. It's a way of turning that early suffering into a resource for future generations.
It's a powerful full-circle narrative, and they've also invested heavily in his educational path.
Oh, massively. They gave $50 million to his alma mater, Oregon State University, in 2022 to establish the Jensen and Lori Huang Collaborative Innovation Complex.
Which is designed to be a premier research center for AI, material science, and robotics.
So it's not just a gift, it's a strategic investment in the future talent pipeline that Nvidia relies on.
And not forgetting his graduate institution, they gave $30 million to Stanford back in 2008 to support the Jensen Huang School of Engineering Center.
This pattern shows a consistent strategy of funding the institutions that directly contribute to the research and development that drives Nvidia's business and the broader tech industry.
And most recently, in early 2025, the foundation provided a major contribution to the California College of the Arts,
matching a $22.5 million fundraising effort. This was critical in helping the arts institution address financial deficits and enrollment challenges, showing a diversification into supporting the creative infrastructure that often works alongside technology.
That long-term success and technical impact have inevitably translated into just a massive pile of awards and recognition, particularly centered around engineering and the AI revolution.
It truly reads like an awards montage of the highest honors in the tech world. He received the IE Founders Medal in 2020 and the Robert N. Noyce Award, which is considered the semiconductor industry's highest honor in 2021.
And in 2024, the recognition became hyper-specific to the AI moment. He was elected to the National Academy of Engineering,
specifically for high-powered graphics processing units fueling the artificial intelligence revolution.
Furthermore, he's been jointly recognized alongside the other true intellectual giants of deep learning,
acknowledging that the hardware was just as critical as the algorithms. In 2024, he received the VinFuture Prize Grand Prize, sharing the honor with Yoshua Bengio, Jan LeCun, Jeffrey Hinton, and Fei-Fei Li for their groundbreaking theoretical contributions to neural networks.
He also shared the prestigious Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering in 2025 with that same group of pioneers, solidifying his role among the true architects of modern AI, not just as a businessman, but as an engineering visionary.
And finally, tying it all together, he was named Financial Times Person of the Year in late 2025, right alongside the Time recognition.
The recognition is complete. It acknowledges the unique three-decade journey from a niche graphics company to a global infrastructure linchpin.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at the sources we've examined today, we see this dramatic, almost fictional contrast.
Between the CEO's humble, profoundly difficult start cleaning toilets in a reform school, working the graveyard shift at Denny's, founding a company with $600, and his current status as the leader of the $5 trillion AI era.
It means that the narrative of relentless persistence, adaptation, and strategically managing pain is absolutely central to his success. The early, near-fatal technical missteps, the quadrilateral focus, the lifeline from Sega, and that ultimate near-bankruptcy.
They weren't just challenges, they were a defining crucible.
They forced the company to establish that relentless internal culture symbolized by the motto of being 30 days from going out of business.
That constant focus on survival, on learning and pivoting, from quadrilaterals to triangles, from niche gaming graphics to general-purpose computing with CDA, and finally to machine learning. That's the true blueprint of Nvidia's dominance.
The efficiency forged in the pain of the early 90s made the company uniquely resilient for the explosive growth of the 2020s.
So let's leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought, connecting back to Huang's perspective on the immense difficulty of this journey.
He has often spoken to students about the necessity of adversity. He told Stanford students that success requires ample doses of pain, and then added the controversial wish, "I hope suffering happens to you."
He believes this difficulty is necessary for personal and organizational growth. And as we mentioned, he also said that building Nvidia was 1,000,000 times harder than expected, and if he had known the pain involved, he probably wouldn't have done it.
So here's the question for you to mull over. Is the intense, often cut-throat atmosphere that required such endurance and suffering, that relentless 30 days from going out of business mindset, is that necessary for such revolutionary long-term success that reshapes global technology?
Or is Jensen Huang's unique journey, forged in reform school grit and diner coffee, an outlier, a product of a less efficient pre-AI world?
That the rapidly advancing, efficient technology of artificial intelligence might soon make obsolete.
Something to chew on as you consider the cost of building a $5 trillion empire. That is a deep dive for another day. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time.
Welcome to the debate. We are diving into the phenomenon that is Nvidia. In October 2025, they just shattered every market record, soaring past the $5 trillion market capitalization mark, a first for any company anywhere. And this explosive, frankly unprecedented success has put a glaring spotlight on the man who's led it all for over 3 decades, President and CEO Jensen Huang.
The attention is, well, it's certainly warranted. I mean, the speed and the sheer scale of NVIDIA's valuation spike are historic. It's been driven almost entirely by their dominance in high-performance computing and, of course, artificial intelligence. Huang's visibility, this Jensanity thing people talk about, has become a kind of cultural marker, you know? It signifies just how central the semiconductor industry is to the entire global economy now.
And that right there brings us to the core tension we have to analyze. When we look at this extraordinary success, this unparalleled longevity, what's the real driver? Is it primarily a product of Jensen Huang's unique, intensely personalized leadership style and the sheer, almost painful resilience that was forged in his deeply challenging formative years? Or is it simply a matter of the company's brilliant strategic technical positioning and just impeccable timing in the AI market?
See, I come at it from a different angle. I think the evidence points toward the measurable factors: technical acumen, these crucial market pivots, and, the immense professional expertise of an electrical engineer leading the company at precisely the moment the high-performance computing market just exploded.
I see the appeal of simplifying it down to just market strategy, but I really contend that Huang's idiosyncratic management and his frankly unparalleled personal history are the essential differentiators. They're the non-replicable bedrock that allowed the technical strategy to survive the multiple near-fatal errors NVIDIA made along the way.
And I'll be arguing that while that personal history is compelling, it's really just the biographical backdrop. The quantitative success, I mean, the shift from a niche graphics card company to a $5 trillion behemoth, that is fundamentally rooted in successful technical execution and capitalizing on the AI boom.
Okay, so let's start with that bedrock I mentioned, resilience. The company's very existence hung by a thread, and not just once.
Huang himself has been pretty candid about it, admitting that when they started, the three co-founders, quote, had no idea how to start a company. They made a critical, almost fatal technical mistake right at the beginning, focusing on quadrilateral primitives when the market was very quickly standardizing on triangle primitives for 3D graphics.
And that specific detail, the quadrilateral failure, that's crucial. But it highlights a technical miscalculation, not necessarily a lack of personal character. That technical miscalculation required a leadership response that was rooted in character to survive. We know that before the Riva 128 chip finally saved them in 1997, they were literally, and this is a quote, down to 1 month of payroll. The unofficial company model that came out of that, our company is 30 days from going out of business, that isn't just some clever Silicon Valley maxim. It encapsulates a leadership philosophy forged in real hardship. And this capacity for painful endurance was developed long before he started Nvidia.
You're referring, of course, to his formative years?
Exactly. This is a leader who, as an undersized Asian immigrant at this religious reform academy, the Oneida Baptist Institute, cleaned toilets every single day. He later worked the graveyard shift at Denny's from age 15 to 20, absorbing lessons in humility and just a relentless work ethic. This intense personal experience is what allows a CEO to withstand the pain and suffering and the embarrassment and shame of sustained corporate near failure. That specific singular resilience is what drove them to pivot, to survive, and to just keep pursuing innovation for over 3 decades.
Look, I appreciate the focus on endurance, but endurance only matters if the underlying technical bets were sound. While the hardship narrative is compelling, the quantitative success is fundamentally rooted in technical and strategic decisions made by an expert electrical engineer, a man with degrees from Oregon State and Stanford. He wasn't some charismatic outsider. He was already a respected microchip designer at AMD and a technical officer at LSI Logic before he even co-founded Nvidia.
But so many respected engineers found companies that fail. The key is how Huang transformed his unique personal approach into an operational mechanism. His current style it's almost unheard of, a flat management structure with around 60 direct reports. He believes senior executives require the least amount of pampering. He refuses to wear a watch, operating in this continuous high stakes now. This highly personal approach is what ensures agility, not just the technical prowess of his employees.
Agility is necessary, yes, but the growth was contingent on successful technical pivots, which is where his professional expertise is really revealed. They were founded for PC gaming, but their ultimate explosion was driven by the decision to massively expand GPU production for high-performance computing and AI. That jump from $3 billion in 2019 to $152 billion in late 2025 was driven by global technical market timing, not his personal clock management.
That brings us right to our first core contention then, the founding narrative, character versus expertise. You cite the technical background as, sufficient professional capital. I contend that the nature of the founding itself highlights a character-driven success that fundamentally informed their risk-taking.
And I would counter that the founding story is heavily romanticized. I mean, they formulated the business plan at a roadside Denny's diner. It's a nice biographical detail, sure, but it's totally irrelevant to the $5 trillion valuation. And while they capitalized the company with a $600 cash contribution, $200 from each founder, that's trivial in the context of professional Silicon Valley financing.
I disagree that the $600 is trivial. That moment symbolizes the necessity of bootstrapping, that ultimate commitment that forces a founder to internalize failure if the company collapses. This risk tolerance, forged in a life of scraping by, is what allowed them to endure the shame of that quadrilateral failure, fire a third of their staff, and survive on that investment from Sega. That history gave Wang the capacity to handle corporate pain.
But corporate pain is a constant in Silicon Valley. The venture succeeded because Huang, Malachowski, and Preem were skilled engineers who had already finalized this successful GX graphics engine at LSI Logic. They didn't sell their story based on hardship. They sold it based on technical superiority and competence. Expert investors like Don Valentine of Sequoia Capital recognized the professional capital, the engineering talent, not the romantic story of the Denny's meeting.
But that technical talent made a major mistake with the quadrilateral primitives. Let's be clear about what that meant. In the early 3D graphics market, you needed a standard way to build a virtual world. Primitives are the basic geometric shapes you use. Nvidia bet on quadrilaterals, four-sided shapes, while the rest of the emerging market, led by DirectX, standardized on triangle primitives.
Exactly. They were technically wrong. But the resilience you talk about is only valuable because the professional engineers had the technical ability to execute the immediate, costly pivot to triangles. The engineering team was capable of correcting the error quickly, and that's what Valentine paid for. It was a technical course correction, not a miracle of character that saved the company.
But enduring the cost of that course correction required the character. And that leads us directly to contention 2. Management style versus market timing as the catalyst for trillions.
And I maintain that the $5 trillion market capitalization is a direct consequence of a massive global technological event, the AI boom. The GPU became the indispensable component. This is the central thesis. Let me explain why. Deep learning and AI require massive parallel processing, thousands of calculations happening all at once. The GPU, which was originally designed to render complex graphics by processing thousands of pixels at once, was already built for exactly this kind of task.
It was a technical opportunity, sure.
It was a perfect storm of technical timing. Nvidia had the correct hardware architecture, the CUDA platform, that allowed programmers to easily access the GPU's parallel power for non-graphics uses. The growth aligns perfectly with the rise of AI technology, culminating in Huang being named an architect of AI. His management style, while unique, merely supported the correct technical decision, a decision made years after the company stabilized.
I'm just not convinced that the technical decision alone could have been monetized without Huang's deeply personal, long-view leadership structure. Longevity is the prerequisite here. Sustaining an executive tenure for over 3 decades, especially through multiple industry cycles, is almost unheard of. This specific longevity allowed him to absorb the cost of the initial graphics failures and then, crucially, maintain the vision to strategically position the company for the AI pivot years in advance.
Many CEOs are long-serving. What makes Huang's style the singular factor?
It's the intensely flat, personalized structure. 60 direct reports is an astonishing number for a CEO of a company this size. He doesn't sit in a corner office, he roams. This ensures he is perpetually exposed to problems, unfiltered across the entire organization. This unique agility prevented the kind of organizational stagnation that plagues so many successful, aging tech companies. This management mechanism kept the window open long enough for the AI boom to arrive. A more traditional bureaucratic CEO would have lost focus, lost the technical team, or been replaced by a board during the periods of prolonged underperformance.
I agree that the leadership style is distinct, and it contributed to the company's agility. However, the style is merely supportive infrastructure. The critical factor was the content of the decisions, the shift away from being purely a PC gaming supplier and toward becoming the engine for scientific research and AI. If the GPU architecture hadn't been technically capable of the parallel processing required by deep learning, no amount of flat management would have yielded a $5 trillion market cap. Technical superiority and market necessity are the multipliers. Resilience is just the baseline.
But you can't dismiss the foundational nature of his personal history when discussing his management philosophy. That takes us to contention 3, philanthropy as a window into leadership philosophy. You can see how he balances personal history and corporate strategy just by looking at his major donations.
Okay, let's analyze those commitments.
Well, I'd highlight Huang's donation to the place where his resilience was forged, the Oneida Baptist Institute in Kentucky. In 2019, he gave $2 million to fund Jensen Huang Hall, acknowledging this difficult reform academy where he cleaned toilets as being integral to who he became. This is a profound, symbolic investment in his own narrative, a leader whose personal history guides his corporate values of humility and constant self-assessment.
I acknowledge the symbolism of the Oneida donation. It's a powerful biographical detail. But if we look at the scale and the intent of the major strategic donations, a completely different picture emerges. His $50 million donation to Oregon State University, his and his wife's alma mater, was specifically earmarked for the Jen Hun and Lori Huang Collaborative Innovation Complex.
And that was dedicated to what, precisely?
Dedicated explicitly to artificial intelligence, material science, and robotics. Similarly, his $30 million gift to Stanford University was for the Jensen Huang School of Engineering Center. These are calculated, strategic investments in the future technical pipeline of talent and R&D for the precise areas that fuel Nvidia's market dominance.
But even that strategic investment shows his character. He's reinvesting in the academic institutions that provided his own technical foundation.
It's more than just reinvesting. It is securing a future labor force and advancing core research that directly benefits the corporation. When you compare the $2 million symbolic tribute to his painful past against the $50 million investment in future AI technology, the proportional difference tells us where the long-term multi-trillion-dollar focus truly lies. In technical superiority and strategic advancement, not in personal history. Personal history might dictate where you make a symbolic gift, but corporate necessity dictates the size and the purpose of the most significant investment.
I disagree that it's simply a technical investment. The act of returning and acknowledging the difficult origins, building a dormitory at a place of hardship, reinforces a culture of resilience within the company. It demonstrates that failure and struggle are part of the process. That willingness to embrace risk and potential failure is what allowed them to transition from gaming graphics to the CUDA architecture for high-performance computing in the first place, which was inexpensive, multi-year gamble. That resilience is the connective tissue.
The resilience is necessary, but the correct technical direction is sufficient for the scale of success we're talking about. To suggest that cleaning toilets prepared him specifically to manage the technical complexities of deep learning infrastructure, well, that risks confusing correlation with causation. Huang's technical education and his experience as a microchip designer provided the expertise to make the necessary shifts. His character merely provided the necessary energy to finish the job.
My argument remains that the sheer resilience and unique, deeply personal approach to leadership, forged through intense hardship, were the fundamental bedrock. It was what was necessary for Nvidia to survive early failures and maintain the sustained, decades-long commitment required to seize the AI opportunity. It took a leader who understood enduring pain to manage the decades-long road to $5 trillion.
And I reaffirm that ultimately, an engineer leading a technology company has to be judged by the successful execution of technical and market strategy. Huang demonstrated this through his prior work, and most crucially through Nvidia's timely and successful transition to GPU-accelerated computing for AI applications. The character provided the necessary staying power, perhaps, but the technical execution provided the trillions.
So it's clear we still hold opposing views on which variable really acted as the ultimate catalyst.
Indeed. Pinpointing the defining factor for a sustained success of this magnitude is incredibly challenging.
But Huang's story, I think, compels us to appreciate the profound and complex interplay between the interior life of a leader, that personal history of endurance, and the external strategic vision required to navigate exponential technical change.
Absolutely. The conversation about what truly makes a generational CEO and how strategic vision interacts with personal drive is one that the Nvidia story ensures we will all continue to explore.